Hello, I'm Hazm Seeker. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. Jordan's economy struggling to cope. We'll look at the stresses proving the last straw for many people. Also this week, the airline business. Find out if it's clear skies ahead or turbulent times for global carriers in 2018. Plus, why top cocoa growers are trying to grab a bigger slice of the chocolate market. Well, people in the Kingdom of Jordan have been staging angry protests over the rising cost of living. The king was forced to sack the prime minister, and the government had to back down on a controversial tax hike. An IMF-backed plan to raise both income and business taxes is what triggered the protests, and although that's now been scrapped, those measures are just the latest in a string of reforms. Earlier this year, bread subsidies were cut, and costs have risen for small businesses. Jordan received a $723 million loan from the IMF in 2016. And the government has a 3-year plan in action to bring down debt levels. And then there's the economic impact of hosting hundreds of thousands of refugees from neighbouring Syria and Iraq. Jordan's debt amounts to around $37 billion, which is about 94% of GDP. And according to official estimates, 18.5% of the 10 million population is unemployed. Despite being home to some of the world's most important historical sites, like the ancient city of Petra, Jordan is resource poor. It relies on aid and loans from its oil-rich neighbours and the United States. Jordan has also been hit by conflicts in neighbouring Syria and Iraq. It's taken in around 1.3 million refugees from Syria alone. Well, joining us now from the Jordanian capital, Amman, is Dr. Jawad Anani, chairman of Amman Stock Exchange and a former deputy prime minister in one of the previous governments. Thanks very much for being with us. So the Jordanian government has pushed through these austerity measures for the better part of 2 years now. And the effect of it for millions of Jordanians is a higher cost of living. And it's clear that there's a great deal of public anger there and it's not going away. So what's to be done?
Well, right now, I think that we need, after 6 years of austerity measures, actually, to look into the self-criticism and evaluate what had happened. So the best way is to change the paradigm, which we have been following so far, to concentrate on fiscal policy and fiscal reform without affecting any development, has actually proved that we have got neither one. Neither we succeeded in fiscal reform, nor have we caused any growth, tangible growth, that would enable us to face the twin problem of unemployment and poverty. So therefore, the best way is now to focus on pro-people policies that would aim and focus on creating economic growth, creating projects, tangibles, deliverables that people can identify with and feel that the government is working for them, and it is a people's-oriented approach.
But how do you do that, these people-oriented policies, as you say, without adding to government debt, which is what the government is trying to reduce?
We need to ask the International Monetary Fund for 2 years holiday, that we should not increase taxes. Even if it takes it, I need to borrow to invest, not borrow to cover current expenditures.
All right, just picking up.
We have to do that.
Just picking up on that point about the IMF, do you think that they would be amenable to that, to adjusting their policies, extending the program in order to give some sort of breathing space for the Jordanian government and by extension the Jordanian people?
Yes, sir. I think that the IMF, just like any other international organization, they are looking for success stories to tell the rest of the world. We're not asking the IMF to change its own model, but we are asking them that instead of decreasing the debt GDP ratio from 96% to 77% by the end of 2021, to make that in 2023. Now, that will be tenable if we really begin to create growth. If we grow, the denominator, which is the GDP, is going to grow, and therefore the percentage of, if we manage to maintain deficit as is, then we can cause a decrease, a percentage decrease in this ratio. And so this is the only approach we have to do, and that requires very strong effort on the part of the Jordanian government, the part of the Jordanian people, and the private sector. And you have to engage the whole population, because this is how you create synergy in the society. You restore the spirit. People are over-exhausted from taxes, and they cannot take it anymore. But if you really address them, feel that you are empathetic with them, they will begin to respond to your policies. Otherwise, we will continue to do the same, using the same ingredients, using the same process, and hoping to end up with a different dish. That is not going to happen.
You talked earlier there about what you referred to as external challenges. There is, of course, the ongoing war in Syria, which has been going on since 2011, and the refugee problem that's resulted from that. Jordan has taken a huge amount of Syrian refugees. How much of a drain has that been on its economy?
Well, it has been a big drain on the economy. Of course, increase in population usually causes a decrease, an increase in GDP. That goes without saying. But the increase in GDP was no way commensurate with the increase in the population. On average, a Jordanian has been suffering from a decrease in his per capita income every year over the last 6 years. This is burdensome, and people are asking, when is there a hope? Therefore, at least if I look at it from this welfare point, you can see that the Jordanian people have been paying in terms of decreased income that's coming their way. Secondly, they have been facing increasing levels of cost of living because refugees are crowding out the market. They are causing demands on the basic necessities, and many Jordanians find that they have to go and seek some of the services that are usually provided by government, like education and health care and so on, go and seek it in the private sector, which causes them to pay higher prices that would impact their budgets as well. So therefore, we reached a stage where many Jordanian families' budgets have been actually strained, and they are asking now the question, is it my budget or is it the government's budget? Now, we need to enhance people's budgets so that they can spend more, they can feel more relaxed, and that will automatically lead in due time to the increase in government revenues.
Good to speak to you. Dr. Jawad Anani joining us there from Amman.
Thank you, Hassan.
Now, another country that is in need of IMF cash is Argentina. It's agreed a bigger than expected $50 billion financing deal. The government there asked for the IMF's help to stop its economy from sliding into crisis. The currency has seen steep falls versus the dollar, and inflation is running at 28%. Many Argentines are opposed to IMF help. They still blame it for the country's economic collapse and debt default back in 2001. Well, Alan Sibilis from the National University of General Sarmiento blames Argentina's current problems on bad government policies.
We're going back to the IMF because of an economic crisis, essentially, generated by the policies of the Macri administration since they assumed in December of 2015. Argentina's main issue is the foreign exchange constraint, what economists call the foreign exchange constraint, i.e. the lack of foreign exchange, or dollars as they say here, to meet its external needs, be it trade, be it tourism, be it debt service. And so the way the Argentine government has gone about solving that problem under Macri has been a very dramatic increase in public debt.
All right, still to come on Counting the Cost, a summit in Singapore. Find out what North Korea wants on the economic front when Trump meets Kim. But first, fighters and footballers top the list of sports moneymakers over the last 12 months. I'm talking about Forbes' annual ranking of the world's top 100 highest paid athletes. Floyd Mayweather leads the list. The now retired American boxer heads the pack for the fourth time in 7 years, earning $285 million. Footballers Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo round out the top three. Basketball is one game that's more likely to make you rich. 40 NBA players made the list this year, led by LeBron James, more than any other sport. There are no women on this year's list for the first time since 2010. Tennis star Serena Williams was the only female athlete last year. And those who are listed earned a total of $3.8 billion in 2017. Now, iPhone maker Apple have acknowledged what many have been saying for a while now. Its products have become too addictive. So in recognition of that, it's announced plans to launch new features designed to help you use your phone less. But at the same time, Apple is also designing even more new features to keep you staring at your screen. A major policy shift for Africa's fastest growing economy. Ethiopia's new prime minister wants to loosen the government's reins. So in future, state-run telecoms, power and aviation sectors can attract private money. Analysts are welcoming the move. And from now on, Ethiopian Airlines, Africa's largest carrier, will no longer be off limits to foreign and domestic investors. And we could be seeing some higher airfares in the not too distant future. That's because rising fuel prices are hitting airline profits around the world. Aviation trade body IATA this week cut its profit outlook for 2018. Jet fuel prices have surged more than 50% over the past year. It said trade tensions also pose a risk for global carriers. A year ago, a blockade by 4 Arab countries on Qatar banned its flag carriers' jets from their skies, and it's meant heavy losses for the airline. Andrew Thomas met with Qatar Airways CEO Akbar El-Bakr in Sydney.
This time last year, just before the blockade was announced, Qatar Airways was flying in every sense of the word. Your profits were up, you were expanding new routes. Then the blockade, and it's been a different story since. How much has that blockade affected you as an airline?
Do you think that Qatar Airways stopped flying? We are still flying. We are still expanding. And it did impact us, that it increased our flying time. It put pressure on my operational cost, but it did not stop the will and the determination of us to keep on our path of growth. And this year, actually, since the blockade, we have received the best airline of the year. We have received over 30 aircraft. We have added over 19 destinations, and we have continued our investments in both Cathay Pacific and Air Italy. The impact has only been on my bottom line, but not on our determination to keep on continuing.
But let's talk about that bottom line. You made a $500 million profit in 2016-17. You've talked about
534 million.
You've talked about a substantial loss this financial year. How big is that loss going to be, and how long is that sustainable, those sorts of losses?
I cannot tell you the amount of the loss because we have still not finished our accounting process, but we should be announcing our losses in not too distant future. However, we can sustain these losses for the foreseeable future, but we cannot sustain these losses if the blockade continues for beyond the horizon that we have in mind.
So let's talk worst case scenario. The blockade does carry on long term. Are you going to need investment from Qatari government?
My answer is yes. I should not fool anybody. We are state-owned company. The shareholder of Qatar Airways is the state of Qatar. And when there is a requirement for capital injection, of course the business will go to its owner to ask for capital injection.
Do you think that's likely?
At the moment, I don't think it is likely, but I don't know. I cannot give you for certain an answer.
What about expansion plans into the US? Do you feel that you've settled the dispute with the US government by, well, you're planning to publish your accounts in full?
We never had any dispute with the United States. We had dispute with the 3 carriers that were crying foul. We have proven to them that we have always been publishing our accounts. They had access to our accounts, and we had also in the past told them that we have no intention of fifth freedom carriage over Europe. So at the end of the day, they did not get anything more than what we were doing in the past anyway. So all this fuss about us getting subsidy and not publishing our accounts was mere public relations exercise by them to gain support from their unions.
And you feel it's over now?
I think it is over because we have signed a document with the United States government and the matter has been put to rest. And we will continue to deliver on what we have agreed with the government of the United States.
You've talked in the past about defeating the blockade. What would that mean in practice? What does defeat mean?
Defeat means that they did not meet any of their targets that they blockaded us to achieve. We have not capitulated. We have not given in into any demands. We have continued our growth. Qatar has continued its investments. Qatar has continued its normal life. And Qatar has been very well supplied by Qatar Airways.
We've got a new Secretary of State in the US, Mike Pompeo, very different character to Rex Tillerson. Does that change anything there?
Well, he already told them that enough is enough. So the message is very clear. Now it is for the international community to put pressure that this should not last any longer. If they don't want us to operate into their countries, if they don't want trade with our countries, it's fine. But to blockade a country is against international norms and international civilized behavior, which I have said already in the past. I am sure that there will be a time when the United States will put pressure and a continuous pressure that this blockade must be lifted immediately.
Now we're taking a look at the underbelly of supply chains. On the one end, you see a bar of chocolate in a shiny wrapping. But let's rewind a little bit from the expensive processing and marketing. The Ivory Coast and Ghana are the world's first and second biggest cocoa producers. And many people there are so poor that they can never afford the final product. So the two governments have decided to team up to get a bigger share of the global chocolate profits. They say they'll coordinate production levels and sales policies, and that could mean the cost of a bar of chocolate will go up. Candy Industry publishes an annual list of the top 100 global confectionery companies, ranking them by net sales. In 2017, the American manufacturer Mars was ranked as the leading confectionery company in the world, with sales of about 18 billion US dollars. Italy-based Ferrero Group, which makes Kinder and Nutella, came in at number 2. And Mondelez International, which makes branded chocolate such as Cadbury, ranked 3rd, net sales coming in at $11.5 billion last year. Well, joining us now via Skype from Davos, Switzerland, is Anthony Fountain, Managing Director of the Voice Network, a coalition of European NGOs and trade unions that focus on sustainable cocoa. Thanks very much for being with us. So can I assume that you are in favor of what Ivory Coast and Ghana are trying to do here in terms of getting a bigger share of the spoils? Tell us why and why now?
In the last year and a half, we've seen a major price crisis in the cocoa sector that specifically in Côte d'Ivoire has had devastating results for cocoa farmers. They've seen their income reduced by about 37% overnight. These farmers were already desperately poor, and so measures need to be taken to address the extreme poverty of cocoa farmers. And there's a very important role for governments to play in this. The price crash was to a large extent due to overproduction, and so the two major cocoa producing nations really should work together to ensure that there is a higher cocoa price through managing the supply. That might take some time before those effects start getting in, but it is essential that they start moving forward, start working together, and start working on a better income for cocoa farmers, amongst others through pricing interventions.
And how much power do the cocoa producers have here? Because in terms of taking on the chocolate industry as it currently is, they are up against some powerful forces on the other side in the companies.
So when you look at the way prices are set, a lot of that is done through kind of terminal markets, which is a very complex set of computers basically looking at what's happening. And so that's almost impossible to change. But if you look at the fact that Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire together do about 2/3 of all of the cocoa in the world, then if they would want to, and if they make the right interventions, they could very much impact the situation of the world's cocoa market, at least in the short to medium term. it's a no-brainer that if you've got two countries that do so much cocoa, of course they can have an impact if they want to.
The problem potentially as well, though, is that you have two countries there who have very different policies when it comes to the cocoa market. They have different ways of going about it, about setting the price and so on. How do you get them to cooperate?
Well, they've started working together now, at least at a top level of trying to talk with each other, which for the longest time they were direct competitors. And so kind of these first tentative steps are good first steps. But the question really is, how is this going to work out in the medium to long term? And that will require a lot more trust than they currently have in each other. And to be very honest, I think it'll also require more integrity, that they'll do the right thing. Because in the end, historically speaking, both nations have really tried to get the bigger piece of the pie for themselves, understandably so. But that in economic terms, we talk about a zero-sum game where one person wins at the other person's loss, and it doesn't work that way. They need to work together to get to a better position for their farmers.
From a consumer perspective, is this eventually going to mean us paying more for chocolates at the sweet shops?
Oh, I certainly hope so, because currently we're not paying for what we're buying. There's a lot of hidden costs in the chocolate that we buy that we're simply too cheap to pay for. Costs of child labor and deforestation and extreme poverty. And the people paying for that are the farmers and future generations. So I certainly hope that we will end up paying more for our chocolate because we're not paying enough now.
Appreciate you talking to us. Anthony Fountain joining us there from Davos. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you.
And finally, it is the first ever meeting between a North Korean leader and a sitting US president. And anticipation is running high. One issue that North Korea will want to discuss is its economy. Investors believe there'll be good times ahead if things go well in Singapore. Scott Heiler reports.
All eyes are on Singapore for next week's Trump-Kim summit. But what comes after the handshakes and the photos? Matia Tomba is a Singapore-based international investment expert. He conducted a business workshop in North Korea 3 years ago. It was done through the nonprofit group Chosun Exchange that has been operating in Pyongyang for several years. He thinks that if and when North Korea reintegrates into the global market, it'll act as the world's cheapest factory. But the process will take years, and its biggest ally, China, will benefit the most.
There is no other place in the world like North Korea, so by definition will be the cheapest place. Salaries will be extremely low, so there will be an interest mainly from the Chinese to produce goods there.
He sees North Korea's path to be similar to that of one of its Asian neighbors to the south.
We can see the case of Myanmar, for example, where sanctions have been lifted, so companies can operate in the country, but so far the main partner remains China. For the others, it's still difficult to operate and adjust in this environment.
While China has a huge head start as an investment and trading partner with North Korea, some other nations are well positioned, including the summit's host. Singapore has maintained diplomatic relations with North Korea since 1975, and the nation had been a trading partner with North Korea, but suspended trade and stopped issuing work permits once tougher UN sanctions were imposed. Occupying prime real estate in central Singapore, just around the corner from Parliament, the North Korean embassy occupies a few floors in this nondescript building. On the heels of meeting U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in Washington, Singapore's Foreign Minister Vivian Balakrishnan is in Pyongyang this week for an official visit. He said having the summit in Singapore shows his country is trusted as an honest moderator, and the meeting is a contribution to world peace. But we won't know until next week just how big or small this contribution might be, nor how long it will be before the promises of a more prosperous North Korea can take hold.
And that is our show for this week. Remember, you can get in touch with us by tweeting me at Hazem Seeker and use the hashtag AJCTC when you do, or drop us an email. Counting the Cost at aljazeera.net is our address. And there's more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That'll take you straight to our page, which has got individual reports, links, and entire episodes for you to catch up on. That's it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Hazem Seeker from the whole team here. Thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.